welcome to this new Tech Captains episode. So today we're lucky to have Thiago de Faria, who's from Brazil. He's been an architect manager at AWS, was CTO for a few years in another company, and in general, active in the data science, machine learning space for many years. And now I believe self-employed contracting for big companies such as Nike, but he'll tell us more in a minute. Hi, Tiago. How are you today?
Hello, hey, Ron, Gareth, pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So as usual, I'm here with Gareth to grill you and see what you
Hmm.
will share with us. As we start, I don't know if you can maybe roughly like give us an overview of your career and how you ended up contracting in the Netherlands, for big corporates in machine learning coming from Brazil. Like, what's your life journey?
Oof, okay. I will try to make it brief to not bore everyone, but I studied theoretical math at university a long time ago, and then I started going towards statistical learning and probability. And when had my first job, I noticed that the biggest problem was not having the fancy new algorithm, but actually getting the right data in the right place at the right time. And then I start to go a little bit more to software engineering as like trying to understand how data is structured, how this is going. And I even went like to Oracle DBA and like all of those stuff back in the day. And
Yeah.
then the data science boom started. When that came onto it, I knew that I was a little bit ahead because of the theoretical stuff. I started doing a lot of stuff, started working with startups, started always did a lot of consulting jobs for big places, for the government, and ended up in the Netherlands at what feels like a long time ago. And after some AWS time, I decided it was time to go back to a little bit of consulting, but I like to do hands-on. So I started here at Nike quite recently to help on their AI/ML journey in the supply chain.
Okay. And when you were at AWS, like, how would you describe the role of solutions architect really? Because it's quite broad. Like, do you actually touch any code, or you more like jumping from a call to another with a client giving you advice?
Ooh, that changes a lot because, as you told, it's quite broad and we have quite different types of solutions architects. I can talk about my team. Like I was a solutions architect manager working for startups, first at the Benelux only, but then at EMEA level, working mainly with early stage startups. And our role at that point was almost like a Sherpa when someone is trying to climb the Everest or go through the Himalayas. Like sometimes they don't know the path, they don't know how to do it. We've done plenty of times. We're all former CTOs, developers, DevOps engineers, and we try to guide them to make sure that they're making the best technical decisions without like adding too much technical debt. Because as a startup or anything, there is always technical debt because you need to go to get there faster. But how do you diminish that? That was the main journey.
And that's always the I think there is a misconception that you can get to a place where there isn't, especially in a startup or a scale up, where you're constantly making that judgment between speed to market versus cost or whatever else. And so one question I had to ask you about that was what do you think the biggest misconception is that tech founders have about AI? What did you hear the most that you just thought, no, you're completely wrong thinking that?
Ooh, it's a little bit tricky because maybe what I say today is going to be completely different 1 month from now with how the
Exactly.
speed of things are.
Yeah.
But I do think that for the former years, what was the biggest misconception is that AI is a silver bullet. Like, oh, let me put some AI into this product and the product will be better. Or let me do this. That is not the case at all. You need to define properly what problem do you need to solve. And I usually challenge the people saying, let's forget about the AI. Let's forget about the technical implementation. What is the output you want to have? Okay, let's assume that you have that. What is the action can you take? Because a lot of the times we do have vanity AI or vanity metrics or vanity software projects that they want to get to an end state that I tell them, okay, assume that everything is perfect. What can you do with it? And when they cannot answer that to me, say like, okay, let's go back to the whiteboard and circle what can you act on it. Otherwise, it's just AI for AI.
Yeah, for the sake. Yeah.
And so, what's your opinion with what's happening today, where the whole world is putting their hands on AI with ChatGPT and Google Bard now?
Wow, I think it's fantastic. Like 15, 20 years ago, first time that I got to know Jansen de Koon, Joshua's, and all the work related to deep learning and all the evolution that it came from. It's a fantastic pace. It's a fantastic place. Um, I am not one of the alarmists that would say that this is the end of humanity, civilization, we are the edge of a precipice or anything like that. But I do think we need to tread carefully with the expectations of what it can be done. This last 3 months, since I think last week of November was when ChatGPT went online, to today, the evolution is just insanely fast. So we must understand where it's going. And because, for example, the latest YC Combinator batch, and for people who do not know, is like one of the biggest startup accelerators in the world, if not the biggest one. I think half of it, it's basically using ChatGPT behind the scenes to do something. And that is great. But at the same time, with overpromise, there is a risk of failing expectations and going into back into a winter. And I would hate to see AI fall back into that.
So you're saying that it's changing a lot. So obviously, when you entered that world 15, 20 years ago, like you mentioned, it was very different. So what would you say someone who's entering that world today and wants to go into data science, AI, machine learning, like what should they look for? What should they do? What they shouldn't waste time on?
Yeah, I think that depends at which abstraction layer they want to get into it. If you want to work for the open AIs and the metas and the things that are actually building the models from scratch, well, you need a lot of math background. You need probably a master and a PhD on it to go into that foundational part. But if you want to leverage AI to use it, to me, that's going to be just another tool on your belt for a lot of people. There are API calls away now. Of course, there is a big paradigm shift that we're moving away from something that is if analysis and loops and even functional program, but that gives you a binary output to something that depends on accuracy. And even if it's 99% accurate, maybe the most important case that you're going to fail is the one that is going to break or make your company. So going into that unknown of, I don't know if this is going to be that useful or bring me a lot of money requires a big paradigm shift that sometimes we are not used to.
Yeah. So what you're saying a bit in a way is that because obviously this AI is just an API call. I mean, I see it myself, in my company Coleno. We've integrated ChatGPT to auto reply to emails. But we've had other models before to have some machine learning to predict the next action you should take. But all of them, they're always, ChatGPT obviously is an API call. It's just what information you feed it. The other machine learning is some AWS, SageMaker, or others that's also API calls. So, like for most companies, from what I understand from you, it's not really worth it developing their own models or their own tech.
Yeah, and I do think that you were correct for the 80-20 to the Pareto case. Like the majority of the case, you're going to be able to solve with out of the box APIs or out of the box models. But that doesn't mean that that should be your end goal. I just think that the benefit that you get from going with that is so much faster, your speed to market and your innovation and proving your concept than actually trying to do your model from scratch. So, and you clearly see that, for example, with Bloomberg, with the Bloomberg GPT case. Like they could have leveraged ChatGPT, but Bloomberg is such in an advanced stage of technology and requirement that they could, using the concepts of language of large language models, build their own version of ChatGPT by leveraging their own data set, and that is better than using ChatGPT. But we're talking about a multi-billion tech company that is there. And if you as a startup thinking that you were such a snowflake or you as a developer that you can do that by yourself, that's a tricky ask and a lot of lifting for you to get at that stage.
So one of the things I thought would be interesting was I just pulled up. So I got two tabs here, and I've asked Google. I'm going to ask Google and Bing the same question, right? So what I've typed in is opinions on ChatGPT, right? So just the first page. So on Google, I've got it's a dead end. That's researchers at MIT or somewhere. Then there's another one saying it's going to have a massive impact on higher education, which I think it probably will. Is it a radical opinion on it? Someone saying it should be burnt down. And then what else we got here? ChatGPT is dumber than you think. That's from the Atlantic. So that's all Google. Oh, and the last one is, it says the LA Times, an AI takeover is not inevitable if you value creative work. So then on Bing, it says, is it a security risk for your business? I think it probably is if you're not careful. Can it learn on its own? Not likely. Search could kill the internet. Universities will warn against using it. I mean, the opinions are just, it's everywhere, isn't it? What is your kind of number one take on it? Because obviously this is an area of expertise for you, all of that stuff. What do you think is, what do you think is the thing to be careful of? Is there anything to be careful of?
Yeah, I think that there is something to be careful about anything, any technology, any usage. There is a phrase, I don't recall who said it, but nobody wants to be the new Oppenheimer, right? So, so saying that is completely safe in the sense that there will be no evolutions or repercussions that could be harmful, that is a little bit too naive, in my opinion. You can already see people using large language models to together with the generation of voices to do scams, right? Recently, we've seen people generating voices. For example, I can pick it up Ron's for 3 seconds. Voice, generate a fake voice of him, put some ChatGPT to generate something that maybe sound like him, find his mother's cell phone, and utilize that to create a scam to try to make her transfer money to me. That is all there. Anything that we create can be used for something that is not ethical. But that has never stopped us from moving forward. There is, however, one big discussion that it is. We've done that for the last thousands of years, but since the nuclear power has discovered, it was the first time that we were able to generate something that could eradicate ourselves. And some people are saying that AI is also going into that trajectory. I don't have an opinion on it yet. I don't like to be the alarmist about anything, not to be the extremist about anything. I think this has to do with the fact that I studied anthropology the first time that I went to the university. So I think everything is quite relative. But I do see that we need to tread carefully into the implications that this has. And a good example is the AI Privacy Act that came out in the European Union, the first draft from the last week. So let's see what serves for us. I think one important thing to take into account forward is which data is being used, how we're going to regulate that, the copyright. You already see problems in the US happening with it. And whatever we decide, I think it's important that we follow that.
Yeah. It's also interesting too. There's a movie about Oppenheimer coming out this summer.
Oh yes, I've seen it. Of course,
there's a
who
big
is the
Hollywood
director?
movie, so it's kind of interesting. Yeah. I don't know who the. It's the guy who did Batman, isn't it? I think he's
Yes,
directing it.
yes, Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a fantastic
Christopher
movie,
Nolan. Yeah.
I think.
On a lighter note, like, is the R programming language of any use in your field, or people just use Python and Pandas?
Oof. Tricky one because when I was at university, I use R a lot. Actually, my end of bachelor thesis was like creating a package in R, and I used it a lot back then. For the last years, I didn't, because mainly the language, the de facto language that I've been seeing for data engineering and for data science teams and like all of it in the place that I've been were Python. But there is still a big research community center around R and Julia even that is quite important. So I haven't used it, but it's mainly because I'm a Scala / Python guy for the last 10 years, I would say.
Yeah. So there was I saw your post, I think, when I was looking at your timeline on LinkedIn. Obviously, there was that article that came out about Prime shifting off serverless. And you made a comment about that, which actually quite resonated with me. I've posted things a few times, and we've talked about it actually on some of the earlier podcasts, that a lot of people get very focused on a trend, and they think that trend is the answer to everything. So, I mean, you can, project management, we had Agile, Kanban, Waterfall, NoSQL versus SQL, all of these different, there's always some current flavor, and everyone thinks that's what I should do. And so I was wondering, where do you think that problem comes from? Is it universities? Is it, is it education? Is it vendor, throwing FUD around? Is it marketing? Why do people jump on a bandwagon? Why don't they understand and look at the sort of wider world of when they're trying to solve a problem with something?
Oof, I think we could go for a
We
book
could go
entirely
for that one.
on this, on why the bandwagon effect is so a big effect, especially on tech. But I do think that we techies are very, we like to be in a group that has connection that goes beyond we are working towards the same objective as a business, but also that we have the same stuff. We are the Vim and IMAX team. We are the Tabs versus Spaces team. We are the PHP is a terrible language.
Yes. Yeah.
We are PHP is a terrible language. No, PHP is great. Or I will never use Python or Java. Oh my God, who wants to work with JVMs? We have this tendency to have a lot of ironic and funny people working in IT that post this premise as a way of almost making joke and like all of it, because I know that everyone that makes this comment, if you talk to them in a one-on-one setup, they would tell, oh, I was just like trying to sound it a little bit more fun. I of course know that there's a lot of PHP stuff that are quite nice. I wouldn't choose for my personal stuff, but PHP is a great language, right? There are those things, and I do think that bandwagon is a reflection of our society. Like we see that in the politics, the extreme right and the extreme left go into those absolutes. So I think that that's also translates into the age of internet. The more polemic, the more different your argument in your topic or your video title, the more catchy it is, the more attention you grab. And that's why I think we're going to that. Even that post from Amazon Prime, the title to me was quite unrealistic, because you are not like dropping serverless because of serverless. You are just going to an architecture that better suits your workload.
Yeah,
they are not
exactly. Yeah,
they are not actually bashing on serverless or saying anything bad about serverless. They're just saying like, well, it allows us to iterate fast. After we reach a certain mass, it was better for us to change the way that we build stuff. That's perfect. That's how life should be. We shouldn't be stuck into, oh, I decided that I was going to build like this 3 years ago and I will forever do. That is the entirely anti-concept of how you should architect and design and build solutions. You should always adapt and change.
And I think as well, it was only for a small piece. That was the other thing people were missing. I think it was for the monitoring part of it or something. And yet there's people saying, oh, look, they're rewriting everything and moving back to a monitor for everything. I'm thinking I'm fairly sure that's not what they said they were doing. But yeah, it's funny. I wonder if it's just a social thing, like you said, people grouping common interests.
Yeah, I think I do think there is a big relationship there. And I do think that even that, like, even if you build a monolith nowadays on top of a cloud provider, let's say AWS, you're probably leveraging so many services on that, load balancer and auto scaling and all of it. Calling that a monolith, like we knew like from 10, 15, 20 years ago, that is quite funny, because you're not managing your own database, you're not managing your networking, you're not talking about anything. So that is already a lot of added value there.
And Thiago, so we have a small tradition in the podcast of the guest recommending a book. So from what you sent us before the recording, you clearly a very avid reader. You really likes to read a lot. And I won't go too much into Harry Potter today, which I
Yeah.
think most of us and most of people listening have also read. But there were two books that I was quite interested in. Like you did mention, Think Again from Adam Grant, The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know. But even more, like what I found very surprising is that you also send in your list Fundamentals of Software Architecture, and you reread it very often. And there's a lot of books about software architecture, and very often you read it once and you remember some bits, from the book that you will use during your career. But I think it's the first time I hear someone saying they read a book on software architecture and often reread it. So I'm very interested on that one.
Yeah, so that book from Mark Richards and Neil Ford, I think it's quite interesting. It's not one of the Bible books that sometimes you read when you're at university, even though, because if I tell Neil and Mark that I've been reading this 20 years ago, they would be offended. But this is a book that I quite like because of the patterns and the places that they display. And sometimes I circle back at it, and when I say that I reread it, it's not that I read from end, like from beginning to end all the time. Sometimes I'm just thinking about something, and I remember that I read it in a place, and I go and look into the pattern. That was it. And I do like that compared to other architectural books because I do think it's quite crisp and quite concise because it was made for practitioners, not for university classes. Uh, so I do think that that book is quite good, and the advanced part is also quite nice. I think it's called the hard part, software engineering, the hard part, or something like that. It's also quite a good book, but that intro book is a fantastic way to get started into solutions architecture.
No, that makes sense. And how old is this book?
I'm not sure precisely. First time that I read it was a few years ago. I don't know when the first edition came out. Would have to take a look at it. I think it was
Because it's always interesting with,
I
yeah.
think it was beginning 2020 or something that the first edition came out, so less than
Okay.
3 years ago.
Okay, because sometimes you wonder with all the frameworks that get out every week, especially for the JavaScript TypeScript world. Every week there's a new better one. Like you wonder like how much of the principles are really absorbed by new journers in the industry compared to, oh, I'll just learn that new framework, or do those frameworks just absorb those principles by default?
Yeah, so and I think that that is the biggest distinction of like becoming a software engineer and working with it. You're not here to learn frameworks or how to do this, and the patterns they repeat themselves in the majority of the time. It's quite rare in the last years that I've learned a new software engineering pattern that wasn't just like a renaming of something else that was already described or a combination of other ones. So, and that's what I think it makes great software engineers is the ability to be a polyglot. And like, I am not the best Scala developer, not even the best Python developer. But for example, I started running Rust a few months ago, and I like after 2 weeks, I was able to do a lot of things in Rust because the patterns are the same. Uh, how you break a monolith into microservices? How do you do this? What's the concept of actors? How do you move from this part to that? How is the communication? And all of this keeps coming back and forth. And we have
Mhm.
this pendulum, right, in technology. Centralization is good, decentralization is good, then messaging queues are good. No, enterprise buses are the way forward. No, enterprise buses are bad. It's almost like a coffee and an egg that in the odd year they are good for your health and in the even years they are bad for your health. That's the same thing here with architectural patterns.
Makes sense. And Gareth, I think to conclude this podcast, you had the last questions on Thiago's LinkedIn profile that you noticed.
Yeah, just some interesting stuff. So, One of them I noticed you said when you were at AWS, I think, that you focused on diversity. You said 67% from underrepresented groups. So I wanted to know what does that actually mean in practice? Because obviously there's often a lot of talk in tech about lack of women, a lack of minorities. So what did that mean? What was the work you were doing?
Yeah, that is a work that I've been doing even before AWS, where I usually give coaching and a mentoring to underrepresented group, and I try to make it clear that I mainly talk about explicitly underrepresented group. If you are LGBTQ but it's not visible when I'm talking to you that you are, that's a little bit tricky, and I don't want to go into that merit. So I'm mainly talking about people of color and women on this case. And what I always have done is I love teaching. And in my former place before AWS, I created a bootcamp program that I would actually pay you a salary and I would teach you how to become a data engineer. And then you would work in the projects with us. And that program took us 2 months. And then we would train a batch of usually 8 to 10 recent university grads for it, and I always focus on having at least half of underrepresented people. When I went to AWS, I noticed that there was also this need of the representation of solutions architecture is quite skewed towards white males. So we wanted to have an impact on it, and it was during the growth process of the COVID, right? Everyone was hired, AWS as well. So I made a project to hire underrepresented people as associate solutions architect. And that is a point that I'm saying. For that first batch that I hired people, almost 70% was of visibly underrepresented associate solutions architects. People in Nigeria and Kenya, women in Western Europe, all of that. That was the batch of team that we worked with, and that is quite important to me.
All right. And then I guess the last question, which is probably related, I mean, it is related in a way. You said on your profile, I think you just have one word, which is kindness. And I thought that was quite extraordinary to see that. I wanted to give you a hug, but I can't. Obviously, you're on the other side of the world. I mean, it might seem obvious, but why is that the first word that you use? And do you think we need it in tech more so than perhaps other industries?
I'm not sure if we need more in other industries. I think we as humans and work
Need more
in
in the world.
general,
Yeah,
we did glorify too much the arrogant asshole that get things done. The Dr. House that treats everyone badly but solves the most complex cases makes for a great TV show, but it makes for a horrible coworker.
yeah,
And that kindness of understanding that, hey, Gareth, you're probably having a bad day, so I'm not gonna consider what you've said and how you said like all of this and take this offensively. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. If I'm talking to a third party, to someone that is doing a job with me, well, even if they did something that I don't think it's the best way, I have to realize that they're doing the best with the knowledge that they have. It's quite rare that you work with people that intentionally want to do a bad job or want to take advantage of you.
yeah.
And we shouldn't overstimulate that sense. And how to do that to me is kindness. Act in kindness towards people. Smile, all of it. And that doesn't mean to lower your standards, lower your bars, or to do anything like that. No, it's just treat them how would you like them to treat you. Make them
Absolutely, it's a
aware.
good saying.
And
Yeah.
sometimes over communicate. Over communication is perfect. Tell them how you like to do stuff. And then you can try to make the workplace a better place, and hopefully your life will be better, your family will be better, and that's just the pay it forward kind of stuff. So kindness is important, in my opinion.
Maybe we need a new C-level position of Chief Kindness Officer.
I would love that. I love that. It would, of course, as a Brazilian, involve a lot of party, but
Yeah.
let's not talk about that.
Let's not talk about that. Okay.
On this kind note, then we will stop for today. But Thiago, thank you so much for your time and speaking with us today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Thiago. It's been lovely to meet you. Take care.
And to everyone listening, see you in 2 weeks. Bye bye.